right, everyone, it's the first of the month, which means Wheel Tapping is here to cover yet another title. Welcome back, everyone. We hope your Memorial Day was good. Hope you're all staying safe out there. My friend Tony and I are here to welcome you to 18PA. So let me bring on Mr. Tony. Tony, how are you doing today?
Hello, good sir. I'm doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's exciting, right?
Yeah, this is 18PA, man.
Right. My home state. You know.
Oh my, that's right.
Right. We'll do some Colorado in the future. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. But
there is indeed an 18CO these days.
Right. So welcome. It's June. I'm gonna start adding the date because I don't know when people are gonna listen to this, and I think that that's kind of important. So it's June 2021. This is episode 22, which we are covering 18PA. So 18PA is designed by Mr. David Hecht in 2011. Yeah, 2011, and it's done by Deep Thought and Golden Spike Games. Yeah, it has PA in it, Tony. I mean, the map has PA in it, so yeah, we can call it 18PA. I'm good with that.
It's a part of the map.
It is.
The scope of the game's a little larger than just PA.
Yeah, a little bit. So, what are some of the things that separate PA from some of the other common games that we've played in the past and talked about? Points of differentiation. Sure. We'll use that
Points
term.
Of differentiation.
I like that.
Well, there are many. One is the private companies, of course.
Private companies, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. I'd almost argue the game lives and dies on the private companies a little bit. They're huge.
They're pretty important.
Yeah.
They're pretty important. There's 9 of them, right? And truth is, they're really kind of like minor railroads in most games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and because they lay track and they always split their payment with the owner, or their revenue with the owner. But in this game, these private companies / minor companies have some differences, right? Like, first of all, they don't maintain a treasury, so when they split their payment, you get half, and the bank just keeps the other half, right? And it's just abstracted that the company has funds and stuff like that.
Right.
But the company really doesn't have funds because they are not allowed to buy any trains or pay for terrain or anything like that. So it's kind of a different take on the whole minor company 50-50 pay.
Right.
Kind of thing. But they all start the game with a 2 train and they get ready to rock and roll, right?
Absolutely. So the other cool thing is that the auction is a little different for these guys as opposed to like a normal private, right?
Yeah.
So
it's
I'm trying to figure out how I really want to phrase this because when we played, Kelly kind of talked about it as more you're bidding on the concession or you're bidding on the right to be able to cherry pick one of the privates, right?
That's right.
So terminology, I guess, you're bidding for that right, and then once you've acquired that right, you just pay for whatever your bid is, and then you have to pay $110 for the minor / private, and then it's yours, and you get to pick whichever one you want, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of neat because when you're bidding for that right, you don't have to say, no one has to say which one they're interested in, right? Just whoever wins the bid. So, okay, cool. I'll take number 5.
That works.
Yeah. Oh, it's very cool. You mentioned $110. I'm going to pay my $110 plus whatever you guys, caused me to bid for the right. Could be 0, could be, who knows, right? 5, 10, whatever. But eventually I'm going to get my $110 back because the way that these privates get bought in is after that 4 train event, right? We'll talk about that the four train is a big deal in this game, right? For
Yep.
a lot of reasons. We'll get into those, but when that happens, companies can then start buying in these privates, but they cost 220. So this is another little weird oddity of the game, right? Where the company pays 220, it pays 110 to the bank and 110 to me, the owner
Right.
of that private company, and then it, takes in that private company, gets the token spot, that kind of stuff. Of course, by then the two train has been rusted, so it doesn't really get any trains. It has no treasury, right? To assume, so it's really just, the location.
Yeah,
But
you're essentially spending $220 for a token at that point.
well, yes, but I'm happy to spend that $220 because me, the owner of that company, I get some benefits that might make more sense as we get through this conversation. But number one benefit is normally I can only own 60% of my big public company. But for every private that my company buys, the ownership limit is increased by 10%. So if I bought in one, I could own now 70%. Bought in two, that would be crazy maybe. I could own, 80%. So that's kind of a neat thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we can talk about that again when we hit Shenanigan Town.
And we shall.
And then the importance of tokens is something that we'll talk about when we talk about the map, because in addition to your normal things, tokens also have another benefit. For better or worse, they have another benefit in this game. It's just something else to watch, but but another reason why you might want to have more tokens on your route, right?
Absolutely.
And this is a game where it's a pretty token rich environment. It's not like, say, 46 or 30, where I kind of feel you need to have a token on your run if you want to maintain that run for the entire game. But it's pretty darn tight. Like, it will certainly, you'll feel some tightness and you'll get locked out of places. And guess what? When we get to track and stuff and the map, it's expensive. So, building circumvent route is not exactly that easy to do.
Yeah.
Or possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Or possible.
For sure.
You might not have any money left. So.
Two more cool things about those private companies that make them unique for this game. One is there's 9 of them, right? So the first 3
Right.
on that 4-train event that we'll end up talking about become 10% shares in the New York Central Railroad, which is pretty darn cool. But the other 6 companies will, once they're bought into a company, once we get to the brown phase, you'll flip them over and they'll become a little permanent 2-train, which is also very cool.
Yeah, and it's in a game where Philadelphia and New York are like right next to each other, that little permanent 2 can just be a banger. It really can just sit there and make money for you, hand over fist. Not a horrible thing, and they don't count against train limit, correct?
Right.
So, like, if you end up absorbing 2 miners and you have 2 of them and you have 2 good routes for them, I was sorely tempted to make that happen, because I was New York City, Philadelphia boy, and it was very tempting to try and lock that down. But squeezing $220, because you don't have a choice when you buy these companies in. You need to spend $220. That's the price.
There's no negotiation, right? It's $220.
Yep. So, it sounds great. Like, yeah, I'll get $220, but that might mean you have to make a hold or more to make that happen, because $220, that's a lot of cash to be walking around with.
It is a lot of cash. And because of some of the uniqueness of the privates, right? Like the token location, a 2-train on the other side. Something happens in this game that doesn't happen in a lot of games, where player A would sell a private to player B, because number one, I won $110.
Right.
the company or companies that I control, I'm not interested in spending the 220 on this private for whatever reason. And the other guy's motivated for getting a 2 train and the token, right? So like we actually have seen private companies change hands between players in this game.
Yep, you yourself have done it.
Yes.
But not to mention the fact that it's also one of those games where you think you're going to open in zone A, so you kind of buy your privates there, but then you don't get any of the companies that open up over there. So you're stuck with one of these privates that does nothing for you because you're not even close to it. Right. So, you need to be connected.
Yeah.
So you may not be. You may be tokened out of your connection, and it just might be a worthless token up in the corner of the map that you don't care about.
And the privates don't close, but all they can do after that 2 train rust is basically lay yellow or green track.
Yeah, and they can't pay
not a big map.
Any terrain, which guess what? Almost all the tile, like I'd say 75% of the board costs money. So it's not like you're just building little loop-de-loops out in Nowheresville. That's not happening.
Like if you don't get rid of that private, it's a useless certificate basically at some point.
Yeah. Yep, it really is. So you need to have a strategy for getting them into companies or offloading them somehow, for sure.
Yeah. As you guys can tell, the private companies, Chris and I feel like that's one of the very interesting parts of the game, right? Because like what other title have we talked about the private companies for 10 minutes? I don't know that any, right?
24 is about as close as we probably get, because we're talking about like the privates and how those smaller companies work. Because
the little pre-state companies,
right? But but this game, I mean, it starts with this auction, and there are many times people don't open a big company, or a 5-share is where they start now, in the initial stock round, because they'll have 2 or 3 private companies that they'll run and get cash on before they can afford to open it, or before they want to, because they'd rather spend the money to secure this private package that they want, because the private package, I think, is, in this one, it's almost just as important. Almost. I'd say in 61, it's more important in Russia. But this one, I think it's pretty key. If you have a bad set of privates, you're going to have a bad day.
I agree. I think there's one other, basic thing about this game that's worth describing real quick here, if you want to tell people how the capitalization works for the big companies.
Yeah, so the capitalization is, the big companies they all start as 5 shares except for the NYC, and more on that later, because one of the functions of the game is to build the NYC. It's designed to just kind of spontaneously make that happen. The 4-train, correct? A bunch of stuff happens on that. So the capitalizing the companies, it's pretty much straightforward. 5-share company, you just need to float it with the 20%. Yeah. 2 shares, 40% technically. But yeah, you'll float that right up, and you get your par times 5. Yes, thank you. So that's it. You just get money. And then later on throughout the game, you just go, all right, during the phase when you're allowed to, you can just grow up and get the other half. That's it.
Right. That's your new value.
That's it. And your value doesn't move. It's very interesting, and something definitely we'll get into in the shenanigan phase. But capitalization is very strategic in this one, I think. But it's also a pretty rich game in that respect, right? Because you kind of always have that cash just sitting there waiting for you. It's kind of waiting to bail you out, and it's when you pull the ripcord on the money sack that it all falls out like it's a like you're sitting at Fort Knox or something.
Visual.
So yeah, it's getting money into majors is all pretty basic. Last of the privates, and then we'll kind of head into the into the yellow phase, but I mentioned it briefly, but since you love the NYC, why don't you kind of talk about 1 through 3 on the and I'll bring up the map just so people at home can actually see it, because the 1, 2, and 3 are actually pre-printed on the board already. So I
on the way to Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, under me is the 2 and the 3. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so the 1, the 2, and the 3, their job is to build track for the NYC when it comes to life on the 4 train. All those 1, 2, and 3 tokens convert to NYC tokens. And when the NYC comes into the game, as we'll talk about, comes in kicking and screaming.
Right, and it's pretty much kind of set to run like, hey, guess what? New York City to Cleveland tends to end up being what happens there. But yeah, so if you're playing the game and you're like, why would I buy 2 and 3? They're all the way up in the northwest corner of the map. They're by themselves. They're locked in by mountains. You might want that chunk of the NYC when it forms, because you get that. So it can be a valuable thing. But if everybody has 1, like somebody took 3 and somebody took 2 and somebody took 1, and there's a lot of other variables in there, then obviously that's not as big of a deal for people, because they're not going to care as much.
And when that happens, when 1, 2, and the 3 get distributed like that, and there's kind of a fight for who's going to be the president of the NYC, right? And buying up the other shares. When do you buy them? Because they ain't paying anything till the 4. It's kind of neat.
It is. And yeah, so I think that we covered everything on the private companies. We pretty much talked through everything on that. Just if you're playing this for the first time, just know what the 1, 2, 3 do, and then how that auction works is just slightly different, than your typical auction. And I like the way you talked about it, because it really is more like minor companies, right? Like we almost have like minors, and then we have 5-share majors, and then 10-share majors. Like you really end up having those 3 levels. Excellent. All right. Wow. We're sitting here at like 15 minutes in, and all we've talked about is privates. Good gracious. Just goes to show you this is kind of really where the meat is on this bad boy. So let's get on to yellow. So yellow, we like to talk about the map, the tile set, and the stock market. We kind of already talked a little bit about the map, so let me just bring it back up, just to kind of be able to talk about it. I think really 2 keys to talk about on the map for me are terrain costs and station starting / destinations. So that's really the key things to bear in mind when you're building on this map. There's a lot of costs. Like we have all the Appalachian Mountains that cost like $40 hexes completely to the left of Scranton. And then we have a lot of rivers, a lot of river hexes. So it's very expensive. I think I could sit here and count and not stall the podcast too long how many tiles don't have a cost. So, and again, just bearing in mind that those private companies can't build on anything they have to pay for. So big difference. You're not just building a lot of track for no reason. And then the destinations. Tony, why don't you tell people a little bit about what the destinations and anything you might have to add on about the map?
Yeah, sure. Except for the NYC and the central of New Jersey, all the other public companies have a destination token, destination space that they get their destination token in when they've built track to it.
Right.
And that city's revenue is doubled when you run out to your destination. So it's pretty important, yes, exactly. There's the PRR. It's pretty important to hit your destination for these companies. With regards to the map, and also the destinations here in a second, is one thing about the map is after repeated plays, like it's pretty much the same pattern of track, right? Like it's track's going to go this way, this way, this way, blah 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 blah. It's pretty much the same, right? There you go. That's kind of what all the games look like. The two variabilities of the track are, one on the map here. One is there is some screwage available in laying track. We'll talk about that, and I guess in a second when we talk about the track set and everything. And then, like you mentioned earlier, the tokens, right? There's not a lot of, it's not a ton of spots for tokens. So, there's some good opportunities to get token. But like the screwage and the tokens are really the only variability in the map.
Right.
If there's one like flaw I find in the game, it's that the Erie that starts down there in Newark in the middle, whose destination is, clean the heck up in the Northeast, always gets screwed. Seems to be 9 out of 10 games the Erie gets screwed. He's never going to meet his destination because the 1 and the 2 can lay a green track and just make it hard, and then the Erie's got to plow through a lot more $40 mountains than he would ordinarily have made. So in this map here, not this game, that actually happened, so the Erie just didn't even bother building towards its its destination. Normally the Erie is building from that gray coal mine in the middle towards over there. Yeah. And Nick laid a bunch of tragic track there. And Chris, I think you were the president of the Erie. You just said, screw it, I'll just run other places then, right?
That's exactly what ended up happening. I had that nice little 2 train, so I had the New York City run just pegged. Because I had the little guy in there, and then I was running a 5 train outside the board. So.
When Nick deals you lemons, make lemonade.
Yeah, make Nick-ade. But but notes that we don't have browns outside of a few cities, so that green track it's going to be what it's going to be. So you just have to bear that in mind. So
segue into the track, right? There are no brown upgrades except for named cities.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, when those little green tracks at the top there are not so good for the Erie.
Yep.
Right?
And if you open it late, if you open it too late, and if you don't have any control over that 1-2, you're kind of in a hole.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, if you own the 1 or 2, then you might want to consider owning the Erie. I don't know. It's definitely a gripe that I have with the game.
Yep. And destinations are double the value of the city that you destinate to. So that you're leaving, in the case of Cleveland or Erie, that's a 10-point city on the map. So it's, you're leaving a lot of money on the board.
You're leaving money. Yeah.
There are 2 interesting things on this map. One is the ferry. So the ferry that runs up to Boston, that's kind of interesting. It opens early, but it closes in brown. So you kind of have to plan for that, because to get out there is a little expensive early on, but then it shuts down later, which I think is an interesting thing. And then Scranton with the coal mines. So you have to pay for those tokens. You pay $40 for the token, but every time you ding that, or that company, I should say, dings that, they get a $40 bonus as well. So it adds up. I mean, if that's in your route, you're making bank. And kind of getting a little into trades here, but all the doinks are free. Greedy doinks across the board.
So that makes Scranton a $50 town. That doesn't count against your distance of your train, right? So I don't know. That doesn't suck.
No, it does not. And there's usually, I don't want to say a race, but there's definitely a little priority spent trying to get there, because it's really good early game money to have. Especially when you're considering cities are like 30 at the beginning. Even Newark and Philly are only sitting at like 40. They're pretty low early on in the game, so that's a nice revenue center you get right from the gun. Absolutely.
Sure.
The other thing about the tile set is, and this caught me out a lot building in the south, especially on the Delmarva Peninsula in New Jersey area. There's no tight track at all.
No yellow tie.
Yep, exactly. So I mean, you can even if you're looking online, you can even see my yellow choices, gentle and straights. I don't get anything else. It's which that can be really tough, especially if you're used to it. So the only way to get a tight turn is to literally wait for green and make a Y, because you need the 83 or the 84 to make that happen. Yeah. Don't get caught out.
Even though the map is generally the same, I still enjoy building track on it, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's enough, there is enough interest to make that happen. It can feel a lot like, like I kind of compared the track a little bit to 30, in just that it feels very, you do A, B, C, D, this company does that, this company does that. It's the same kind of swath of the US. So it kind of has, there's a lot of familiarity with that, the track lay and where you want to go. Like even the Pensy kind of goes straight out. Like there's a lot of things that feel very familiar. But yeah, I think it always ends up being fun because it does have a little bit of a race for token spots and a race for connections. I think you're trying to get all your small companies connected so that you can use them, or trying to build tokens where you can just drop them and kind of be annoying. The first one's cheap, the second one's expensive, 40 and 100. So, that first one, somebody can really hose you pretty quick because it doesn't cost them a lot. You can always count on a new company dropping a token on their first turn, because $40 is nothing. I mean, that's cheap. Yeah, you want to do it. So, cool.
Stock market?
Yeah, that's all I got for that one. Yeah, I mean, the stock market, pretty basic, right?
One might even say dull.
Dull.
The game is not about stock, right? The stock market is, even though it's like a 2D market and you go down one for every share sold, shares are good.
Right.
They don't often get sold. And the market is so small that it really doesn't matter. Like, to me, the market is basically a score round, right? It's keeping track of our score, kind of, and it's telling us what the running order is. Because if you pay anything, you move up. It's just, the game is not the market.
Right. It's not like there's no closing areas. There's no yellow areas that I recall. It's just pretty much, yeah, you're paying attention for running order and for how much when your company grows up, you're going to get. Like that. That exactly. Seems the big marker there, right? And basic opening stock prices, nothing crazy. You can't go above 100, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Or 110.
110. I was gonna say, I said 100, and I'm like, nope, it's 110.
I think
my brain's like,
110. Yeah.
Yep. So nothing crazy there. So. All right. So I guess that's it. I guess we talked about the tiles. Nothing else too crazy. It's not like, I mean, it's pretty obvious what isn't there. It's not like 82 where you turn around and you go, oh my goodness, there's only 4 yellow cities, and you're completely hosed. I mean, yeah, you might turn around and look for the tight turns, but you only do that once or twice before it really, sinks in that this map does not give you tight turns. So it's not that bad, which is interesting because it's lost in track, but no tight turns. Yeah, there's that. I don't know.
Until green, then you get the little Y thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so expensive map, obvious corridors. The maps kind of look similar. We said the same thing about Florida, right? Like all the maps kind of end up looking exactly the same, but it's the journey more than the destination, right? The map's kind of not telling you a lot of that picture, and how much hosing went on, and how much people got cut off and restricted and not able to build around, and all those other fun things that happen in that process.
Timing.
It's all about timing. So speaking about timing, let's talk about some trains. So we're going to move on to the green phase, where we like to talk about the trains. And a little birdie told me that 4 trains are actually permanent. Sorry, Todd, in this game. So
Yeah, it's definitely a different train roster in this game, right? Because 2, 3s, and 4s, and 4s kill the 2. I mean, everything you'd normally expect, but the 4s
right.
are permanent.
Yep.
And they're not super expensive. So, no. And the 4s trigger all the good stuff that we're gonna, talk about here in a few too. It's an important train in the game.
It really is. I think that there's, and when you say it's not expensive, $400. Which, when you're getting a capital infusion at any point during the game, where as long as you part a company at a reasonable price and you've been moving forward, you'll have no problem making that money.
Yeah. Well, you can't grow up until the 4 train. That was one of the things, right? But someone's going to start a company. It's going to have $550 in it. And they're going to buy a 4 train.
Yep. And there's not that many of them. I want to say there's 3. Looking at what I'm seeing on the map, decent. I mean, a 4 train will get you almost coast to coast in this game, so it's not like it needs big, huge running trains. But the fact that it's, companies are growing up, the permanent trains are going to get sucked out of the market pretty quickly, and then we kind of move on to the 5s, which are only $500. They're not too expensive either. Cheap permanent at $100, at $400, but a good permanent at $500. For a cash-rich game, it's a cheap train roster, which I find an interesting mix. And then, you kind of buried the lead. I love the 3D in this game. I love that a lot. I mean, a $600 unlimited 3 diesel. Unlimited quantity. So as soon as somebody buys a 5, have at it.
Oh, unlimited quantity available. Yeah. As soon as someone, yeah. It's, and it's a great train, right? 3 cities. So if you've been, screwed over on the track and the tokens a little bit, cool. Just run 3 and pay and double it, right? So.
Yep. So, where I had, the Erie that got hosed, he ended up with a 3D and that 2 train, and he was able to just bounce the 2 as a shuttle between Newark and then the 3D was able to take the long route around and then also ping Philadelphia. So you're making a lot of money with the D. Now the D doesn't quadruple, correct? If you hit your destination, it's not quadrupling that.
I can't remember now, but
no, I think it's still, it only doubles all your destinations as I recall. If it's wrong, I'll put that in. I'll hop in here and say that, but I'm 99.9% sure that destinations don't quadruple
but the 3D is not, all that in a bag of chips, right? Like in our last game, last Monday, I didn't buy a 3D because I had a better 5 train route.
Yeah.
Making more money than a 3 double, so
it's almost like having plus trains versus non-plus trains, right? Because the D doesn't pick up any towns or cities, but if you have a 5 that's catching everything and hitting that extra 50 in Scranton and picking up, doinks all along that route, you can make some serious bank for sure.
For sure. We talked earlier when we were talking about the privates, the 2R trains, those are neat, right? Like you mentioned the 2R going between Newark and New York City. That's a pretty awesome 2 run.
Well, what I like about the 2R especially is that it gives you an incentive to buy in your minor beyond just the token, right? Like you can set up for that great run later. And I think it also makes you have a little bit of strategy so you don't wind up with a useless train in your company, right? Yeah. Like I think if you want to buy, like buying 2 in sounds great, but if you don't have room to run your regular train in those 2, that's a problem, because the 2 R's don't count towards train limit, but that also means they don't count towards they don't help you on your liability.
No, they do. They count as a train.
Oh, they do count as a train. I'm thinking 80 rules where the zombie 2s do not count. Yeah. Okay.
No, they count as a train, which is both a segue into 2 things here, right? Like the 2 R's count as a train, but they don't count against the train limit. Train limit's always 2. So in this game, hey, some of these companies can run great multiple 2 train routes at the beginning. You buy 2 trains, well, you're either going to, when the 4 happens, have no trains, or you're going to shuffle around trains, right, start another company. But because the 4 train is this event, right, you can grow up, get some. So let's say you got caught with no trains. You can grow up, get some money, buy in a private, right? If we're in brown, it might be a 2 train at that point. Like there's ways to deal with. In some circumstances, there's ways to deal with being caught with no trains.
Right.
But like that segues into like the trains, like in the rusting schedule and stuff like that, is also not where this game is, right? Like there's no danger. I have seen
you're not buying a train to choke somebody.
No, no.
If you're buying a train, you might actually open somebody up, right? Like rusting their 2s, they might be grateful for that, right? Because
like, thank God someone bought the 4 train.
Exactly.
Like I've seen many emergency train buys in this game. I think every one of them's been engineered, right? Like it's just there's no train danger, right? There's so much money, and the train, the 4s are it's like this is not going to be inducing bankruptcy.
Right. And I think, talking about the 2 R's too, I think it is important to know you can't buy them around, right? Like they once they're associated with the company, they're there. They're done. Yep. They're not moving. So you can't use them in your train shuffling at all.
The game has provision for loans, but I've never seen loans taken. I don't even have loans in my spreadsheet because like they just don't have them. So.
Excellent. No, I think you're absolutely right. I don't feel pressure I feel track pressure and I feel token pressure, but I definitely don't feel train pressure at all.
For sure.
I think it's more about, can you get the right train in the right company? I think that might, would like you said, would you rather have the 5 or the 3D? And depending on how the purchasing falls, depends on what you may get.
It's a David Hecht game, right? Like this is about running companies, making money, and doing that better than the people around the table.
Yep. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've played this a lot more than I have. I've played this, under a handful of times, and you've played it close to 10.
9, yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen a bankruptcy or any? You haven't even seen loans, so you won't see a bankruptcy if there's a loan option.
Yeah. Right.
But I've never seen anybody out of it, right? Like, and even the other day when we played in preparation for this, I fell back big time, but I was able to blast up into the middle of the pack and start closing in on second pretty, I don't want to say handily, but there weren't miracles happening. I was just making some moves, and I was able to close that gap pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's funny to say this in a 3-hour game because it's a very short game. It's 3-hour games, but you can play the long game.
Yes. So I think that's gonna lead us into shenanigans because that is the long game, right? Like I think the long game is quite possibly the biggest shenanigan in this game. So there are a couple, and they all really evolve around growing up and then buying in other companies, right? I think, Tony, you kind of talked about the one where you can get more ownership of your own companies by having more privates owned by that company. So you get 10%, you get that paper potential in each time. Potential, you don't get the paper.
Well, no, you can, right?
You
because
you
when
have
you
to buy
acquire
it.
the company, you can immediately then buy a share if there's a share available and you have the
Right.
money.
Exactly.
So, and that's during the OR. So, okay, make more dividend, right? So.
Exactly. So, and it's actually a separate step, right? Like, so, one of the things we talked about, David Hecht games, very procedural. Like, you just, it's not like grow up whenever you feel like it. It's
This one in particular.
right.
Yeah.
You walk through the steps of doing that. And, one of the first ones is, do you want to grow up? And then if you say, like, first question you ask when you start your OR, correct?
First you lay track, then you go token, then it's like, all right, do you want to convert to a 10 share?
Right. So you
You want to buy privates.
Right. So if you're broke, you're not paying for track, you're not paying for tokens that round.
Right.
But then you grow up and all of a sudden, so let's walk through the phase real quick, because you're basically going to grow up. And that means essentially just take your 5 shares, put them in the market, and take X times 5, share price times 5 into your treasury.
And
now,
the president,
yep.
and you need to talk about this because you won a game doing this, you dirty scoundrel.
Yes. So then the president has the option to buy their shares. So they can buy as many as they can afford. And they're the only ones who get a crack at it, which is another important distinction. More on that in a moment. So then you now have this influx of cash. You now have the option to buy in minor company or private companies. So then you can buy your private company in, and then you can also buy another certificate with all that newfound money that just came out of that growing up phase. So now you may now have the potential to own more than 60% of your company, and then B, it also happened in the middle of an operating round. So what Tony's alluding to was one of the first times we played this, I was able to time, like I kept one of my companies at a 5 share until very late in the game. We went into the OR, the lead players were at cert limit, and then I grew up my 5 share, and then I was able to blow up cert limit and go above and beyond that. And then I was able to have those paying shares for 2 ORs.
Yeah. With no stock round at the end, because the game ended. So there was no stock round where you would have had to have, got back down to the limit.
Exactly. So I was able, because the growing up and the purchase of those shares happens before you operate. So that also means you get those shares pay that round. So if you're at the point where you grow up because you need money, but you personally can't afford to buy those shares, that hurts you, because now you will not get, where you had 3 shares in a 5 share company, you own 60%. Now you have 3 shares in a 10% company because you didn't save enough money, but now you have to grow up because you need to do XYZ. And now you just lost the opportunity to have 3 paying shares for 2 ORs. So you can, as much as it can be amazing and you can feel like a superstar when you pull it off, and believe me, I did, because it was, I think I was in like 3rd place, and it just rocketed me out front. Because I had cash, I bought a 3D. I think I bought in a small company, so I had a 2 that I instantly could start playing with, and it just catapulted it out into the front.
Yeah, it sucked. I mean, it was great.
It was fun to watch. I'm sure. So
it was. You did good with that. It was like the game gives you your own yellow strategy when you choose to implement
Right.
it, kind of, sort of, right? Because those shares during the operating round, they don't count against
Yep.
any limit, right? So the key is like, okay, you can do that if you had to grow up early, but if you hit a stock round, you might have to, you know, recalibrate your holdings to some degree. You know, and
Yeah.
you in that particular game, you managed to hold that one company out. So imagine this, right? Like it's a 5-share company. You own 60%, so you got 3 pieces of paper. You grow up, all of a sudden there's 5 more in the bank, and you buy them. Now you got 80% of that company just paying you.
Yeah. I think I had 70 because I think I had the minor in there, but yeah.
Yeah, just didn't have enough money to get it all.
And
You know,
and it was like, I think other people, obviously it actually hurt others too, right? Because my company was fully held going into it, so they were getting 20% of this well-running company, and then all of a sudden their 20 went to 10, while mine, you know, went a little higher than 30, so, or 60, it went to 70, and then I was just able to just make bank on that while shrinking to other people and helping myself. And usually people don't trust me, so I get the lower players investing in my company. So
wow.
I don't attract great investments. What can I say? But a lot of fun. I think that now the next time we played, everybody was onto that. So you were seeing a lot of people holding onto a 5 company, and it's one of those.
Hard, though.
It really is. It really is. I'd agree.
To me, man, like that is the shenanigans of this game, right? Is like
Big time.
the timing and the conversion, just like you have written on the little, flyer there, right? Like that's what it is, right? Is because that's a key part in not only running good companies, but doing so to enrich yourself and yourself alone,
Yeah.
or as much as possible.
And it's really contrary, I think, to hold money back during a stock round, because you want to grow up, right? And you need to be able to buy your shares. But it's a two-edged sword, because if 2 other people happen to own your stock and they see you're going to do that, chances are you're not attracting investors, because they're going to take a bit of a hit, but then it could also be better for you. But if somebody's being vindictive and they drop your shares and they drop your share price, so you get $20 less a share, there can be some weird things happen, like when you see that. But I don't know why. I don't know if I give up 20% to get a share. It's not like I'm losing share value. I'm just losing a percentage of payout.
A percentage of the dividend.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing, though, you brought up. And that says, like, in the stock round, if you know you're going to grow up in the first of the 2 ORs, because there's always 2 ORs. If you're running early, you want to have cash on hand, right? And able to buy a bunch of shares, if that's the attractive thing to do. So you might sit on some cash. You might be trying to calculate how much dividends you're going to earn between when your company runs and the start of the round. If you're running at the end, maybe you'll make enough dividends from your other holdings. Who knows, right? But the cool thing is, if you did hold that money back just to buy your shares, you're going to get to buy those shares before it runs, so you're not actually losing out on anything.
Right? It's not like you have to wait around to collect on that. It's an instant reward. So, I mean, that's an incentive.
And then I'm going to run the trains.
Yeah, and I'm sure that had to be, like, I kind of feel like there's a cause and effect there, right? Like, the reason for the structure is specifically to make people want to grow up and give them some value for doing that, right? Otherwise, it would make sense just to run, 5 shares sometimes all the way out, but you're losing money if you do.
As we figured out when we had David on the show for 1826, he's a smart guy.
Yeah, and he likes to play with buttons and push things around, and he definitely did so with this one, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, I think that's kind of bringing us up to our feelings, right? Because,
Sure.
we're grown men. We can talk about our feelings. I let off the last one, Tony. So why don't you give me your impressions of this guy?
Okay, sure. I got some notes here. It's a gentle game. It's a short game. But I think there's, plenty of interesting things happening in spite of there's no train pressure and no stock market shenanigans, right? There's plenty of other interesting things going on. Everyone's, you're just waiting for that 4-train event, right? Because the New York
Right.
Central is going to start. Going to have all this track and tokens. It's going to have $700 in its treasury and a free 3-train. That guy's hitting the tracks running, right? Like, so you might want some of that. That 4-train event allows companies to convert, allows people to buy the privates in, kills the 2 trains, right? Like there's a lot going on that event. So, a lot of setting up, waiting, for that to get triggered. There's a couple gripes, right? Like I already mentioned the Erie, has a tendency to get screwed. And I don't know, we have a tendency to screw it because maybe that's just how we are, right?
I think it's just the nature of the NYC and its position, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's just
privates.
and the nature of the tight track set. I think it's just Erie buyer beware that your destination is not a guarantee, like say the Pensy or something.
Another gripe I have is not a big fan of like little tiny one-off rules in games, But there's one in this game that I really don't like, and that is that in green, brown, and gray, every token that you serve of your company on your route adds a little, $10, $20, $30 bonus kind of a thing to your route.
Right.
We always forget it. It sucks. Take that rule out. Do something else, right? Like, it's just a pain. So that's a gripe I have, and maybe it's just my own problem that I can't remember it. But like, we always are reminding each other when we're playing. Oh, don't forget your token money. Don't forget. It's just a little bit annoying. And the game's rich enough. Do we really need to make an extra, $30 on this route? Probably not. Probably something that should have been developed out of the game. But that's my opinion.
I don't think that the station bonus isn't necessarily one of those things that's driving tokening. I mean, definitely it can help get that first one out because it'll give you a little more revenue. But
there's plenty of incentive to lay your tokens anyway, right? There's just
it's
where the routes are going to be. There's not a lot of options.
Yeah, so I don't understand the incentivization of, wanting to make you play out your tokens. Like to me, that's what that mechanism is designed to do. It's designed to cover up a problem that came up, is like, well, if we make people want to get their tokens out faster or give them more money for the tokens, there has to be something that
all $40. There's other ways, but anyway,
I find it very, unless it was also maybe designed to beef up the NYC. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question where it came from, but you're right. It feels very, like a superfluous toe. It doesn't need to be there.
Exactly. But so, to sum up, do I think this is a great game? No. This is a bad game? No. This is a very good game. Very interesting aspects, right?
Yeah.
And I am one that I like to see and learn about and explore different mechanics, right? I'm a mechanics fiend, and this has several that we've talked about,
right?
Different mechanics that I like very much. And, it's got the NYC in it. I'm a big fan of the NYC. It's my favorite American railroad, thanks to the 20th Century Limited, just a, very important historical train. And so, I am one that's into the history as much as the gameplay. Well, maybe the gameplay more, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's a short game. It's a fun game. When, I bought this game from, Golden Spike, and just on a whim, right? Like, I'm just going to buy it because I was in that stage of my 18xx playing time, it was like, okay, I need to get them all. I need to get them all, right? Because like, hey, let's be honest, right? Like GSG, it's it's a one-man show. Like I need to buy it before he stops making games, that kind of
Right.
stuff. And when we got it to the table, what a pleasant, happy surprise the game was for us, and I think we see that with continued play. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I kind of mirror your thoughts a lot on this one. To me, one of the things you said in the rule book was this was kind of designed to around the concept of the birth of the New York Central, right? And literally, that is one step of the event when the 4 train happens. Like, to me, I said it when we were getting prep for the show. I feel that in 1882, making the can pack is more impactful than making the NYC here. Like, I don't know. There's just something about the way the privates feed into it and things that just kind of doesn't feel as tangible. Feels like it's something somebody else is doing in the game a lot of times, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's just another equal character in the play. It's not the lead actor.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like, when I first heard about 18PA, my brain was, oh, this is going to be about the PRR. Like being that this is where I live, I thought that would be the case. And come to find out, like, oh no, it's not. It's kind of really birthed around the New York Central, and I was kind of like, interesting.
Kind of not really.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to mention that I believe in the future we will endeavor to cover 18MY, because I think that is covering the New York Central birth as well. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of compare and contrast when we get on the other side of that. But
I'll look forward to it.
But I do like it. I enjoy it. Maybe that helps that, I've won a game in a very cool way, and I felt super smart when it happened and very clever. And any game that makes me feel clever, I tend to cling to a little bit, right? Like if it makes me like feel like I planned this thing and I was able to do it and it worked out in the end. When I can do that in a game, that's usually a winner for me. But so that's where I think this one, like you say, I think it sits right down the center of, enjoy playing it, won't turn down a copy. I have one on order myself from Deep Thought. So, in 2023, it'll show up. So I don't think he's that far back. I think last I checked, he was only like 14 months back. So, it'll be interesting. I enjoy it, but I would, like you say, it just makes me want to play more Hecht stuff, just because I like operational games. He obviously likes them too. So,
what the heck? Let's play some more Hecht.
Yep. And they're not Hecht's trains in this.
No.
Even though they are trains, they're not his trains.
And they're his.
Excellent. So I don't even think I need to ask what your priority deal marker is for this one. But what do you have, sir?
I have, and I'll try to get it up to the camera here. I have this little toy locomotive with the New York Central.
Okay.
And it actually, when you back it up and let go,
Nice.
If you have priority deal, I could just send it over to you. I don't know.
As long as you run right smack over the center of all the tokens on Newark or something. Nice.
Yeah, but
which locomotive is that? That's like a diesel, but
yeah, I don't know. I'm not.
It's the Santa Fe one. That I'm used.
Is it like a F7 or something like that from EMD? Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. It's the one that that was the first like diesel train I remember seeing as a kid. Like, because we had Conrail used to run behind our house. So, like, it was a walk. It was a long ride to get there. It was a mile or two away. But Dad used to take me down there and get ice cream and sit and watch the trains. And I remember that loco coming through before we started seeing the big old boxy ones that look like they have D-cell batteries on the back.
Yeah. For sure.
Excellent. Well, this was a lot of fun, sir.
It is. You know, we're recording on Memorial Day of 2021 over here.
We are.
And just want to say thanks to veterans past and present for our freedoms.
Indeed, indeed. Both my grandparents. 1 and 1 and 1 and 2. So there you go. The Colonel, literally, that was
the Colonel.
It wasn't Grandpa. It was Pop or the Colonel.
The Colonel. I love
used to
that.
mow
I
the
would have called him
lawn.
the Colonel.
He used to mow the lawn with a tie. Like that was
no.
Yes, that was my grandfather. Fortunately, he died when I was 5, so I never got to know him. But literally, the top of his desk is now my desk down here. So,
yep. Fantastic.
Yep. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, veterans, and those who have served. We appreciate it. Absolutely. Cool. Well, sir, speaking of, I got to grill some hot dogs. I got to pull some pork. I made some bacon jam for some of those burgers I got coming later. So I got a mojito calling my name. So that's how I celebrate.
Awesome. You better answer that call, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us this month. Be sure to tune in next month to see what shenanigans Tony and I will get ourselves into. Tony and I would like to give a special shout out to all the patrons who support the show. Thank you for listening, supporting, and taking care of us. You can also help us out if you want a shirt. Be sure to check us out on Teespring.
Media, where we all
bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair.
Meanwhile, back at the Hall of Justice, I am just going to make one quick adjustment because I stink at internet stuff.